here we are. We are back from Chains to Change. I am DJ Bruja, and today we have an incredibly special guest, Mr. Calvin Duncan. How you doing, Calvin?
Good. Thank you.
Yeah. So, do you remember when we first met?
Yes. At Tulane University, you was touring the Tulane Law School to determine whether you was going to accept the offer.
Yeah.
And one of the professors that Catherine asked me to come down, and she introduced me to you. That's how we met.
Yeah, we were talking about you, and then she said something like, "I think you might even be around." Yeah. And then and I'd heard about you from Norris, but let's back up a little bit. So Calvin, you got quite a story. A lot of folks are familiar with you, whether they did time with you, a lot of time in Angola, or whether they worked with you after you got out and won your freedom, or whether they went to law school with you yourself. So let's just start. We were talking earlier about this book right here. Yep. So when you were in prison, what year did you go to prison?
1982.
82. Damn, I was like, what was I doing? I was just learning how to break dance. So 82 was a good year for that. So when did you first pick up the West Louisiana Criminal Law and Procedure thick ass book here? What year do you think that was when you first got into a book like this?
I think it was probably 1984, 85.
Okay.
I'd already been indicted. I was in Orleans Parish Prison.
Mm-hmm.
I was the state was seeking the death penalty.
Mm.
And my lawyers wasn't coming to see me. I had no legal, really the lawyers, they was overworked. They had the same lawyers representing everybody that was charged with a capital offense. There was only like one or two lawyers doing that.
And a lot of people don't know that at that time, there was no Orleans public defender.
Yeah. So it was sort of, we had a public defender, but it wasn't the public defender that the people know that exists now.
Mm-hmm.
So we only had a few capital defense lawyers, and they was representing everybody that was in the parish jail facing the capital offense. And so what I would generally do is read the newspaper articles and accumulate articles that dealt with people that was that had lawyers, and the newspaper would always write something about the law, and I would compile those, and I call that my law book.
Okay.
But then at some point, I decided to file a motion with the court and ask the court to give me with a criminal code of procedure.
Because was there a law library in the jail at that time?
No, we didn't have a law library. We didn't have access to any legal research material. So I filed the motion with the Louisiana Supreme Court. I sent it to the wrong court. And then they wound up saying, look, you sent it to the wrong court. You should have started at the trial level. So what they did, remanded it to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals remanded it to my trial judge, and my trial judge called me to court one day, gave my lawyer a criminal code of procedure, and told me, my lawyers told me, the judge said, here's your law book. Don't let nobody take it away from you.
Did anyone try to take it away from you?
No, they didn't. He was more concerned about the guards. When they would come down and do this massive shakedown, they would take our legal material from us.
And so, did you, what was the first time, maybe someone, raided your cell and then saw a legal book? Like
so what they would generally do is do these massive shakedown, and then they would, and some of us would always, they labeled us as naggers, but we was actually trying to get what we needed, like windows, and we to be free from violence. We would file 1983 actions when they would put us in the dungeons, in the administrative lockdown without due process, or they would come and shake down our do this massive shakedown and take all our legal material so that we couldn't do it. And then as soon as they left the tier, first thing we had to do was file a complaint in 1983 to make them actually reimburse us or restore the material that they took away from us.
And there was about 6,000 people back then, or were they not quite at that level just yet in the jail?
I think the parish prison at that time had like 3,000 people.
Okay. About how many do you think were facing capital charges like yourself?
Let's say during my time, I think probably like I would say about 200 people,
Mm-hmm.
because some of them actually was given sentenced to death. In my case, the jury rejected the death penalty, and I was sentenced to remain of my life in prison.
And we've got another book handy too that we're seeing on the shelf. We've got Killing Time, about John Thompson, known to many, including ourselves, as JT, who was exonerated from death row. What you remember what year he went down?
I think John was arrested probably like in 1985.
It was a little after you.
Because I was in a parish jail with John. I remember when he was sentenced to death, and then when I went to Angola and applied for the inmate counsel job, which is the jailhouse lawyer position, John was on death row, and I applied for the job to work with the guys on death row in 1991, and that's where John was.
What was it like the first day you went to Angola?
Well, I would always, when I make the comparison, I would say that the Orleans Parish Prison was hell, and Angola was paradise.
I hear you.
The whole idea was once you was convicted and sentenced, you didn't have any access to legal material. You didn't have access to a lawyer. So the thing was that once you got to the Angola, you could get access to the law library. They had a group of guys there. At that time, I think they had 12 inmate counsel.
Was Norris one of them?
Norris was one.
That guy Norris, he's everywhere, right?
Yeah, Norris was one.
How big of a space was it? You reckon?
The library was I don't know. It was a nice size space to actually have all the updated books. Mm-hmm. We had criminal code. We had the green books, which is the annotated statutes. Yeah. We had federal reporters. We had Supreme Court reporters. We had Sun reporters. So it was a nice size.
Yeah, I used to when the supplements would come out, I would just read every single case blurb that had to do with criminal law.
That's what Norris. That was Norris' job. Norris had to read every case, and what they would generate. Norris and the other people that would work with Norris would make little cards. We didn't have computers back then. We had the index card. So when a person would come to the library, if he was looking for some cases about hearsay, you would Norris would have already updated it, and that guy would pull a card and then see what the volume is, and then go to the shelves and retrieve the book.
So let's talk for a sec about the non-unanimous jury issue. So for people that don't know, right, in Louisiana for about 150 years, was it?
Yep, it was a bit of time.
You could get a 10-2 verdict. Two people could say not guilty. You still go away. 11-1. How many? What was your?
Mine was, because it was a capital offense, it was unanimous.
Unanimous, right?
Unanimous had to be all of them.
And so at what point, and maybe it was while you were awaiting trial, or at what point did you realize, wow, this non-unanimous jury thing, it just don't smell right?
It wasn't until I got to Angola when I started working on people cases. The first, when I realized, began researching it, it was that some guys, especially a lot of them from New Orleans, they was in prison as a second offender, and they used a previous conviction, which the multiple is the predicate to the multiple bill, which led to them being sentenced to 198 years. And looking at those previous convictions, some of those was
non-unanimous also?
Non-unanimous, but they was for 6-member juries.
Because they were pettier. They were lesser crimes.
And so the United States Supreme Court said that for those crimes, it had to be unanimous. So then I would file and say, look, these non-unanimous jury verdict convictions is unconstitutional, and they should not have been used as a basis for the multiple, enhancing a person's sentence. And also at the same time, that when I was researching, I would work on people cases that it was obvious that the guys is innocent. But their verdict was 10-2, 11-1. So back then it was one juror had it right, 11 had it wrong, 2 had it right. And then But I still would raise the issue. Although the United States Supreme Court had said in Apodaca that a non-unanimous jury verdict conviction is okay, that if two of the jurors determine that a person wasn't guilty, but that was okay, those two jurors would not count, and the 10 would, and the person would be sentenced to life in prison. But what we noticed that in a lot of cases that some of those guys was innocent. That was really kind of like really got me onto that. And some of them wasn't innocent. But I didn't find out the history. I just assumed that it was the law. The United States Supreme Court in 1972 said it was okay. And there's only 2 states, Oregon and Louisiana. Okay, so but it's still wrong. It's still, in my view, it's still violated the 6th Amendment right. You have to have every state in the United States required it. But then it wasn't until I got out of prison that I ran across this article in the state Supreme Court library that said that our non-unanimous jury verdict law was introduced for the sole purpose of preserving white
supremacy.
White supremacy.
Yeah. It's funny because, like, I was incarcerated up north. I'd never heard of a non-unanimous jury system anywhere. There were no updates on Apodaca, which was a 70s case, during my stint in incarceration. And I went to Tulane Law School here in Louisiana. I am 99.9% certain that the term non-unanimous jury was never mentioned anywhere. And I took criminal law, right? And now it may have been mentioned in some other classes. I'm not sure. But of course, working with Vote and knowing Norris and everything, I got familiarized about it. But it's just amazing how impactful of a sort of best kept secret this was. And then when we, created a campaign around it, we were able to take a lot of folks that didn't even know about it to then agree, like, this is ridiculous. How is this, like, this is happening? So, but let's get back to, when you got out. Or how you got out, right? And so, because a lot of cases, I kept, from an outsider perspective, I've heard a lot of y'all's different stories or read about them in different ways. And I just see all these kinds of patterns of, like, why there's so many wrongful convictions, particularly in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, right? We've kind of maybe slowed them down a little bit. But, you dealt with how many, you've read all the cases to a degree. What are some of the patterns of, like, why there's so many wrongful convictions in Louisiana?
So I think the 2 reasons. For the New Orleans area, our district attorney, Harry Connick, was like...
Kill them all?
No, he was like, the United States Supreme Court tells me I have to share favorable evidence with the defense. I don't agree with it, and I'm not going to enforce it. I'm not going to require the prosecutors to disclose favorable evidence to the defense, meaning that the prosecutors in New Orleans would actually have evidence that a person is innocent, and they would not share that with the defense. So our prosecutor, Harry Connick, had a policy that say, look,
you don't turn over anything.
Don't whatever the Supreme Court said in 1963, don't comply with it. And the second thing is that we had a system, a public defender system, where people, they couldn't afford the lawyers. We had to rely on these groups of lawyers, but the state and the parish would never adequately fund. So as a result of the prosecutors having evidence, police department having evidence that would exonerate a person, and the public and our lawyers not having access to that evidence, and not having the resource to investigate cases, that led to a lot of people being wrongfully convicted.
Yeah, so it was basically like unchallenged accusations. He did it, and then you didn't have any comeback, including the fact that, you said it was someone who was 6'8" with purple hair, and I'm like 5'9".
Yeah, so my lawyers did not come to see me until the night of my trial, the night before my trial, and they only came to see me to see if I had clothes. My family was going to be able to bring me clothes to wear.
Important stuff, you got any clothes.
That's it. And even years later, my lawyer signed an affidavit that, unfortunately, he just never had the opportunity to investigate my case. So so when you have an agency that done some investigation, that has all of the evidence that would exonerate a person, and you have a public defender's system that's not funded adequately, you have.
That's why the only way it can even work, right, is if you've got, obviously the police are out there at times really pounding the pavement, talking to everybody, getting all these different statements, all these potential witnesses, on and on. They're doing scientific analysis. Like, they're paid by the same taxpayers who are paying the judges, who are paying the system. But when they only kind of inherently work for the prosecutor, and then when the prosecutor is not playing fair, unless the defense attorneys had like their own army of like investigators, which even now, how many investigators are down at OPD, you think?
I think they don't have enough, but they had way more than what they have. And
I still remember though, in recent years, before the parity argument that they should be funded the same, it was like they had just about like maybe twice or three times as many investigators as
I don't know. I don't know the numbers, but what I thought was strange years later, what I thought was strange was that our criminal legal system took advantage of people understanding that they was the fair parties, that the prosecutors would never convict an innocent person, or the police is out there really doing their job. And people in society really believes that they're all fair. They actually do this.
Presumption of the truth.
But the only reason why that exists is because we didn't have access to any of the documents to prove otherwise. And so I thought that was really strange, and that led to wrongful conviction, because when a juror hear that a police officer says that, well, the defendant, I rated him as rights, and he told me that he committed the crime, that he was sorry. Or when a prosecutor says that the witness positively identified this person as the person that killed him, nobody questioned that. And the sad part about it, our lawyers didn't question it either, and our judges didn't request it. I was tried before a judge, Frank Shea, that had one day he had 6 felony jury trials.
Wow. That's just like McDonald's drive-through.
And that's what it was in his section of court. So nobody questioned that until years later that, and so while, in Angola, I used to work on a lot of cases, but the problem was I couldn't get people documents. The state, the government, the documents we needed was in the hands of the same people that unlawfully prosecuted us. And trying to get their documents was a struggle. And then in 2000, we got lucky. An intern named Emily Bolton, she toured the library, and we had a seminar, and we explained to her that, look, a lot of people, not everybody in prison is innocent, but we have some guys that that it looks like they're innocent, but we can't leave the prison and investigate, and we can't get their documents. And she promised that once she graduated from Tulane University, that she would come back and help us. And she did. And that's how the New Orleans Innocent Project was created.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so you won your freedom, like a lot of people. But tell me a minute about the case, the situation that I know multiple people have been in, where you overturn your conviction, and then the state wants to prosecute you or hold you without bail. Then you get this option to sign here and go home today.
Yes. So that is well, I could talk about my own case, and then I was ultimately got the help from the New Orleans Innocent Project. We discovered evidence that goes to my innocence, that if a jury would have heard it, I would have been found not guilty. However, by the time that my case was back before a judge for a hearing, I had a judge, his name is Julian Parker. He was once the prosecutor, and he put on record that he once assisted in my prosecution. But then by the time my case came along, he was like, I don't remember the case, but I did work under the supervision of the guy that prosecuted the case. But because his name was nowhere on my record, he decided that, well, I don't have to accuse myself because I don't remember any of the facts. But I don't know what happened I don't know how he was as a prosecutor. I don't know how he was initially as a judge, but by the time my case came before him, he had really turned to be a person that didn't respect defendants' rights. So every time I filed something in his court, we got denied. When the Innocent Project finally presented my petition to him that shows innocent, he was like, I'm gonna deny it. I'm gonna deny it. And then he did deny me. And then the Supreme Court remanded my case back for a full evidentiary hearing. And he put on the record, I'm going to deny it again. And that's when the prosecutors in New Orleans stepped up and said, look, we got to do something for Calvin. But this judge is not going to do it. But if we tell the judge that Calvin would continue to maintain his innocence, plead guilty, maintain his innocence, would you let him out? And my judge was like, hell no. And then he ultimately had a change of heart in January the 7th, 2011. He allowed me to plead guilty to manslaughter and armed robbery. The sad part about all of that is that for 28 and a half years, I told the truth.
And then finally got the lie.
But when I told a lie that I committed the crime, that's the way I won my freedom. So I took the deal because I had been in prison 28 and a half years. I was really exhausted. I had lost hope. And it was my opportunity to be free. So I took the deal and I walked out of prison.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw a person walk free on the news while I was locked up. And at the time I'd been maybe down for, I don't know, like 6 or 7 years. And I knew of the case. I didn't know that I never worked on the case. And I didn't really know the guy personally or anything. And I remember, it was like a big deal and, the news cameras, whatever. And then there was someone, I believe it was a prosecutor or someone like some governmental person. He just said, like, this shows the system is working. And the guy did like 12 years before he was able to show. And in your case, 28 years. And, our organization is full of people, 25, 30, 50. And the system is not working if it takes that long. People watch football and when they review a call, they want that review in like 2 minutes. And here we are taking 28 years to, to get the documents, to be heard. And I wanted to destroy my TV when I heard that time. I like jumped off my bunk and I was like, the system's not working. It's like, someone needs to own that. And, props to, DA Jason Williams, administration putting together a civil rights division. What do you know about that and how that's been
it's a result of what Jason has done with the civil rights division. It's really a miracle. It's a sad thing that civil rights divisions have to exist, but that's where all of the documents are. And now they are now looking at these documents and saying, whoa, this guy is innocent. This guy should not have been convicted, or this guy should not have been given that amount of time because they had mitigating factors that they had in their files. So with the Civil Rights Division, what they have done is a group of lawyers, prosecutors, is actually looking at these cases anew, fresh, and bringing those cases to the judge's attention and saying, look, a grave injustice happened in these cases and we need to do something about it.
And they've got kind of a backlog, correct?
Yeah, well, they have a backlog because there's so many.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it.
Because we're like a few years into it, but they're still not anywhere close to caught up.
Because we didn't have our lawyers, the public defender lawyers didn't have the resource. And then we was prosecuted on the administration that we're not complying with Brady.
Yeah.
And we're not making sure that your Sixth Amendment right is secured because we're not going to properly fund it. And that's why so many cases.
Yeah.
The unfortunate part about that all of that is that some of those guys, they old and they die. before somebody could actually look at their cases.
And did a lot of them lose their records in Katrina?
Just about in the criminal district court, just about everybody lost their records.
But is the prosecutors or they don't keep? They're like the prosecutors don't have like their own separate records that might have survived, or
yeah. From my understanding, the prosecutors have their own files. Their files, because it wasn't in a basement. Their files exist, whatever that consists of, and that is where all of the evidence is at. That's where the police reports are at. That's the investigative reports. That's where everything is at. So that was preserved, to a great extent. So that's what the Civil Rights Division is actually looking at, is some of these old cases. Well,
if that's accurate, I'm not saying it's not, right? But it sheds new light on how important that district attorney's election was, that voters organized to educate. Here we are, the role that we played in trying to put someone in office who would, for instance, open up this gold mine of records. I mean, obviously there's a treasure chest of, exoneration material, which, depending on what way you look at it, whether it's from a human rights perspective or getting the right person versus the wrong person, or saving money on people who are getting older that are getting the end goal of healthcare.
That educational part is the key, because once the people in our community and society realize that our faith in the group of people that we, authorized to do these things in our name wasn't as honest and credible as we thought they were. That education didn't have us kind of like, we made a mistake. It was a good thing when we had trust in us. We put our trust in the legal system, hoping that the person that is going to be the person to administer that, is
also going to follow those laws.
But then now, through the education that folk does, people realize, whoa, we had a few bad apples, and now we have to actually look at it. And I think that's what is happening here. In the North, as a result of the Civil Rights Division, we realized that there was a few bad apples that what they did was withhold evidence, and as a result of that, and then another thing is that I hope that at some point that we look at the fact that not only was evidence withheld, but the guys was not given a fair trial because our public defenders were not adequately funded.
Yeah, and also another thing that kind of stunned me when I moved down here in 2011. You got out when I got in, I guess. Yeah. But is the amount of time they can hold you without charging you, and the amount of leverage that can put on somebody, right? And so to give 2 months of holding somebody with no charges filed, it's like, presumably you arrested them based on something.
And that's what everybody would assume.
Yeah.
But 60 days is a long time. What happens in those 60 days now? And a person is arrested. I mean, within weeks,
you lost it all.
He lost. He's getting evicted. He's late on his payments. Somebody probably went in his house and stole all his furniture. Or if he get out if the DA's office realized in 60 days the guy should not have been arrested, when he go back home, if he has a home, his furniture may be still out there.
And the stress that it puts on a family.
He lost his job. He lost his community and his family. So
and a lot of people that do get caught up in that situation, they may have just other reasonable challenges in their life, right? If you're in, you're a man or a woman, and you're in like a relationship kind of spat at the moment, then you get scooped up, and then the other person might be like, "We'll see."
And if you're the breadwinner of the family, then that's in jeopardy.
And so a lot of people end up, pleading guilty. But they lean over you with the 9 unanimous jury, say, you're going to get 3 people to say innocent? I doubt it. You're a young black man in this system, right? You got obviously issues around race and juries, right? There's a whole body of law around that and all that discrimination. You've got the withholding of the evidence. You've got the holding somebody in, as you described, hell at the parish jails.
So the offer of a plea, you're going to take it, whether, guilty or innocent.
And the thing that that I realized even when I was awaiting trial and then, first starting out was, a lot of people had that earlier conviction that might have been a year, 6 months, 3 months, even just probation, and they just pled it. And then now they're trying to be like, well, I didn't even do that one. I just needed it to go away so I could kind of get out and live my life. But now here they are on the second one.
A multiple offender.
And they're hitting them up, or even the third one, right? And they never even really did any time. And it may have been on somewhere, well, it wasn't even my bag of weed, right? And now they're facing like super penalties. And it's like, do you want to take the 30 years or do you want to sign for this 5? And people sign.
I know a lot of people took deals just because they just couldn't afford. They didn't want to risk going to trial. And in a lot of those cases, there was the only evidence that could have exonerated them. But they have that previous conviction that they pled guilty to just to get out of prison.
Yeah.
Now they convicted felons. If they if they testify as to what actually happened, the jury, the prosecutor is going to tell a jury that this guy was previously convicted, and therefore he's not credible.
Yeah, and the threats of giving you 99 years, for example, don't work unless you give people 99 years.
And we was giving people 198 years.
Yeah.
We had one judge in Section B, Matthew Braniff. He had the nickname is Maximum Mac. If you went to, it was a known fact that if you pled guilty, in his mind, you was on the road of rehabilitation. But if you didn't plead guilty, it was no rehabilitation for you.
Right.
You was going to be scamming the system. So anybody that pled guilty back then, they say that he would actually be lenient with those people. But if you went to trial, he gave you the maximum sentence.
Yeah, just the presumption of guilt. So when you got out, you joined up with Capital Appeals Project, didn't you?
Yeah, so because while I was on the inside, my job was to assist people sentenced to death. I did that for 19 years. And so when I got out, I applied to the Capital Appeals Project as a paralegal. And I was
you just like someone told you they were hiring, you filled out the thing, or you knew someone down there?
I knew the lawyers. And
you made it sound like you applied at like Wendy's or something and filled out the form.
I knew the lawyers, and I wanted to be close to my clients.
Yeah, these are all the cases you've still been working on, right?
And so that was a blessing. And at the same time, I wanted to go to school. So I got out on a Friday. I was on Tulane campus that Tuesday.
Okay.
Trying to
fill out the forms and everything.
To go to school. And then I'm told, you can't just sign up to go to school.
It doesn't work that way.
You gotta go do 4 years of college. You gotta do undergrad. I don't know what an undergrad is, but I had to go do it. And I did it. And I did it at Tulane.
Yeah. Nice. And so, and along the way, while you're going to school, it wasn't like you were just going full time, right? You were still doing this work.
I was working for a full-time job and going to school. And my full-time job is what I'm doing right now is being a program director of the Light of Justice. And what I do is about the program, or what we do is help people at the post-conviction stage of their cases. In Louisiana, after your appeal has been finalized, you're not entitled to a lawyer at that junction. Only person that's there to help you if you can't afford an attorney is inmate counsel. But while in prison, working as an inmate counsel for 23 years, I saw all of the hurdles that we faced. So one of the things that I wanted to do when I got out is try to eliminate some of those obstacles. One of them was getting access to the documents. Another obstacle was us being forced to rely on outdated case laws. And so what I did is start helping the counsels on the inside, to keeping them updated, actually going back to do training and getting other people on the outside to actually take notice of what the councils are trying to do.
And are you working with them across the system or just in Angola?
So before law school, everybody, the whole department, every facility in Louisiana.
Even if they're in like a local parish jail?
No, so some people from the local jail would write me and say, look, I heard about this case. Would you send me a copy of this case? And then I would print the case out and mail them a copy. But one of the things, another thing that was an obstacle is that our appeals lawyers was not notifying the clients that their appeals was being denied. And as a result of that, they was being...
You missed the
deadline to go to the Supreme Court. So what I did, I developed a system where every like twice, or sometimes every day of the week, I would check the appeal court records. And if an appeal is affirmed, I would download that appeal decision, print it out, find out the location of the individual, mail them a copy of that decision and say, look, I think this is your case. If this is your case, here's a copy. Go see an inmate counsel to proceed to the next step. And so I did that for many years.
About how many a month or a week do you think that added up to?
Most of the time, like, I would say about no more than like 40 or 50 cases.
In a month?
In a month. Okay. I did that that was part of my, and so if, like for the non-unanimous jury verdict, if I spotted that one of those cases had a non-unanimous jury verdict, I would just put a little extra paragraph and say, look, it looks like you have a non-unanimous jury verdict. I suggest that you make sure you go get with a counsel to proceed to the next court. And if you do, once the Supreme Court denies you, if you would like me to try to find you a pro bono lawyer to appeal your case to the United States Supreme Court. And so I did that for years.
And that was Ben Cohen?
And that was Ben. Ben would take the case. We would work on the case and proceed to the United States Supreme Court. After 23 tries.
Yeah.
No, 22. The 23rd, United States Supreme Court said, look, I think we need to look at this case, this issue.
Well, and interestingly, that wasn't until after, when did they made the decision to hear it? After we already won, right?
So the United States Supreme Court said review is granted, but by that time, Louisiana citizens.
So they did grant the cert before we won it?
No, it was after.
It was after. So everything happened after.
I think it was after.
So it goes to show you, really, it was we invest so much in and expect justice from our courts, but in the end, it's like people power movement.
It was the education when we would when we went out, not just, when we would go give, talk to religious groups and different groups and tell them about this non-unanimous jury verdict. The key thing was that it was based upon race. It was the sole purpose was to make sure that blacks' votes didn't count. And through that education, when it was presented to the voters would say, no, we don't want a law that says that. And then the United States Supreme Court say, look, the law is unconstitutional. It clearly violates the Sixth Amendment right.
And the other thing is not to discount the racism that gave rise to it, because you had to have something extreme for people to do something like that. But even if you step that away for a minute and you say wait a minute, I thought it was convicted beyond a reasonable doubt. If two people or one person is willing to say, nah, this person didn't do it, well, doesn't that make a reasonable doubt?
Yeah.
So, they sat through the trial. They heard all the evidence. They swore an oath, and here they were holding their ground, probably in the jury deliberations and saying, nah, I got my view on it and I'm sticking to my guns. And they held out in the face of probably a lot of peer pressure, right?
Yeah. And if a person was arrested in Mississippi, in Alabama, they had in order to convict anybody in any other state other than Oregon and Louisiana, even in the federal, all of the jurors have to agree that this person is guilty and that the government proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Only outliers was Louisiana in Oregon. And in Oregon law was really against Jewish people. Their whole motive was to make sure that, they punish Jewish people. In our cases, that they was to punish blacks.
And over a century after the Civil War, you still had all white juries, like across the South in particular. And a lot of people don't know that even though black people, air quotes, had the right to vote, for such a long time. I mean, up until about 1965, from 1900 to 1965, after that Constitution got passed, something like 9% of black people in Louisiana were voters. Like 91% were not able to sort of pass all the restrictions. And then if you're pulling jurors from the voting list, well, you already don't really have any black people on the list. And so it's not until, what was Batson v. Kentucky, like 76, I think, 1976?
Batson is 1986. 86. And that's when the issue came that they had some rogue prosecutors, the few blacks that would qualify to sit on the jury, or the jury that actually made the cut, the prosecutors would arbitrarily and racist, I'm gonna get it right, but arbitrarily say, y'all two blacks are eliminated. Mm-hmm. And so the United States Supreme Court in that case say, look, if you see if this has happened, that is unconstitutional for the prosecutor to use their preparatory challenges to eliminate blacks. And like you said, it was a few blacks that was really
even qualified to make it, right?
Yeah. And the sad part about even though once we said as a society in Louisiana, the voters say we don't want unanimous jury verdicts. What we did, we limited the cutoff date of who would get access to this new law.
Right.
And so not only did they do that, so Louisiana, we say unanimous jury verdict is no longer valid. At the same time, we introduced a legislature introduced a bill giving the judges the authority to seal the records. So you're in prison, you have a non-unanimous jury verdict, but the judge has authority to say,
ain't gonna look.
Don't give this evidence up. And that was passed. Nobody voted against that law. That law shut hundreds of people out that I can't get my records. Mm-hmm. And now, so Louisiana did the right thing, but on the other hand, they say, oh, we're going to make sure that you don't get your records.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now hundreds of people linger in prison, dying in prison, because at the same time they did the right thing, they made sure that the right thing could not be enjoyed because now you can't get your records. Mm-hmm. That to me was, and nobody voted against that.
Right.
Nobody.
And I think that's, we do our best, particularly nowadays, to, try to be educating legislators on things that are happening and, and maybe questions that should be asked or points that should be raised. The crazy thing, you sit in front of me, as somebody who basically got convicted prior to so many critical laws being passed that would have saved you, and a lot of people like yourself. And, Vote is full of people of your generation. And I don't think a lot of the listeners, a lot of our core people obviously get it because they've been part of this work. But I think the average person doesn't really have a sense of what you thought ended in like 18 something or other was going on all the way up to like 1980s, 1990s, and that's how the mass incarceration becomes so mass so easily. It wasn't just the criminalization of drugs. It was all these different laws that allowed for people to be so easily scooped up.
When they passed the law giving us access to our records, they also passed a law that say we wasn't people either. So people like me, and so in Louisiana, in order to get access to public records, you have to be a person. Well, in 1994, 95, we passed a law that says that people like me and the rest of the guys that's in prison after the finality of their conviction, they are no longer to be considered to be a person. for the purpose of public records. So that's what the light of justice. That's I try to serve. I try to be that arm on it because I am a person now because of my.
Look, I'm here to tell you, you're always a person.
Well, thank you. But we have a law that says, and we find with that. The weirdest thing about that to me about being out that's really strange to me is that we have legislatures that have no clue of what's going on behind these prison walls. So, like when you pass a law to outlaw non-unanimous jury verdict, and then this other person over here passed a law that said, we're going to give you this, but guess what? You can't get it because we're not going to let you get the documents. Or because now you have access to your prosecutor files, we're going to pass a law that says you got a time limitation to get in court. Well, I can't get my records. And then after that, you pass another law saying you're not considered a person. And nobody questioned that. That is, to me, since I've been home. And that's what I love about Vote. What you love about Vote? Tell me. We created this thing. It started with the Special Civics Project. And our whole purpose was to educate. If we could tell the outside world what's really going on, they would do something about it. And so far, that has been proven to be right.
I think we're making progress. There's a lot more to go. One thing we were speaking about briefly earlier, I mean, somebody could be born in 2000, have gotten convicted with a non-unanimous jury in 2017, had it finalized by the Louisiana Supreme Court in early 2019, and they're only like about 23 years old now, and maybe they're doing a life sentence, and there's no parole in Louisiana. Yeah. And this is someone who is being told that the Supreme Court decision that it's not constitutional, that the voters' decision that we're going to get rid of this thing doesn't apply to that person.
And he would have to die in prison.
And he's under 30, he's 23, he's 25, whatever, someone young as that. And this assumption that like all these cases are like 1970s guys or 1980s guys or whatever, right?
And the group that was the following year, those individuals was granted
someone that he was an OPP with. Could have been his own cellmate. And that guy got out, and then the other guy is stuck in based on, some of this process that should have been done a century ago.
The United States Supreme Court just didn't say that non-unanimous jury verdict is unconstitutional. They said that system deprived the person of a jury trial. And nobody in this United States could ever be convicted without a jury trial. Being convicted by a non-unanimous jury verdict is no jury verdict at all. Yet you have a whole segment of people,
How many petitions was it when they got heard? 23rd?
That was the 23rd petition.
How many people have filed since that time? We're at 23 yet?
I'm told that everybody...
retroactive too.
Yeah, everybody that has a non-unanimous jury verdict, I'm told that a petition was filed on their behalf.
But have they gotten to the level of petition to the U.S. Supreme Court? Are they there yet?
No. The problem with that is that our United States Supreme Court said that the Ramos decision is not to be retroactively applied.
Well, they did say it's up to the states to...
And our state followed that and said, we're not going to do it. But all of those people...
What if people were to say that, our state is being unreasonable, or another thing where, let's say you're coming out with like an ineffective assistance of counsel claim, saying that you should have been raising this constitutional issue at my trial, and then create another 23 petitions and just keep badgering them to the point that maybe they give in and say, you know what, person that got convicted in 2017 with a non-fair trial, we're going to flip our decision.
So what I'm hoping that would happen is that prosecutors, I'm hoping that all of the prosecutors take a step back and say, look, all of these non-unanimous jury verdicts, conviction is unconstitutional. And then take another step back and say, look, we're going to do what we've been really taught and trained to do. and what we are obligated to do. That is to administer justice.
Mm-hmm.
Do the right thing. Then take another step and say, look, we're gonna reverse these people cases, regardless of whether their cases was finalized before Ramos or afterwards. Doesn't matter. This is what, as a prosecutor, this is what we're supposed to do. Our first job is not to make sure people stay in prison. This first job is not to make sure that they get convictions. Mm-hmm. As prosecutors, their first duty is to make sure that justice is done.
Yeah.
Which, to me, I'm hoping that that's what they do. They take a step back and say, all those convictions is unconstitutional. It wasn't a jury verdict.
Not at all.
Then take another step back and say, regardless, we're going to do the right thing and just reverse those cases and just hope that we don't ever be in a situation like this.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, so speaking of prosecutors and, them kind of doing the right thing or not, there's a recent case, Attorney General Jeff Landry, who's now running for governor, challenged a bill that was passed that allowed for negotiating pleas between, cooperative, defense attorneys filing petitions with a prosecutor who's like standing in the breach and a judge who has to make a decision to resentence people. And it was maybe a win, and then it got struck down as like violating the clemency power, but there was a silver lining in there, was there not?
Yes, pages 9 to 12.
9 through 12.
And in that case, they actually outlined the duties of a prosecutor. And the court said that statute on its face is unconstitutional because it infringes on the executive, the governor authority. However, from pages 9 to 12, the Supreme Court justices actually outline the duty of a prosecutor. And in those pages, the court is actually saying, this is what you all supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. Y'all need to get together. The parties, if the prosecutors see an injustice, they're supposed to get together and try to resolve that. And that's what those pages really detail.
And I felt, talking with Ronald too, and himself also, working on people's cases, through the system, they really laid in there a very clear admission that a prosecutor could just not protest file an objection to someone being out of time, procedurally barred, other things. So if you filed something previously and maybe you missed that cutoff, like you were talking about earlier, because their lawyer was sleeping on the job or overworked or whatever, and now that cutoff doesn't have to be a cliff.
Yeah,
a prosecutor could just say like, "I'm not going to object," and then the case moves forward.
What the court is actually saying is, prosecutors, your first duty is you are the minister of justice. Period. Do what you need to do to make this stuff right. And we needed that language now because everybody is starting to question the judicial branch.
Yeah.
Are they political? And in our state, our judges are elected. And so people are at for years we trusted the judicial branch.
Yeah.
But now that's being questioned. So I think that opinion really kind of say, look, prosecutors, do what you need to do because the people trust you.
The interesting thing is you have a lot of right-wing people out there that, that want folks to do more time and more convictions and this and that. And, it's coming from a position, like an assumption of guilt and an assumption where there's no rehabilitation or remorse or anything like that. And so even if we take that for granted, the interesting thing is you see a lot of them wanting more transparency, more, and they want to understand more about why so-and-so does what they do and how they do it. I kind of chuckle a little bit where it's like, you might not be so excited about what you find, and it may not look the way you think it looks. And it may end up working out better for the folks on our side of the fence that really feel like people are being, you know, it's like two brothers and a cousin sometime, you know, playing poker, and you think that, you know, you have a fair game, but that's not the case. So, you know, we encourage that transparency. And you see now judges running for office, and I think they have a little bit more, at least definitely here in Orleans, there's a little bit more light shined upon, you know, who they are and what they're going to do versus, you know, for years, you know, people probably just got basically appointed. There was no real, you have an open seat, and they would just kind of select who's going to be the judge. And then they would just win the election in a walkover.
I think the educational aspect that you know, what Vote does as a group, we are taking our experiences and we sharing it to the outside of the world, that shedding that light. And now the people say, well, now they question it. They now making a decision based upon not just one side, it's both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is making up the big difference.
And
we were able to actually, you know, have a discussion about things that normally was never discussed when these harsh rules was enacted and these penalties was imposed, like the science about the brain development.
Yeah.
All this stuff through education made a big difference. Our judges are saying, look, you know, what happened was a terrible thing. We can't overlook what happened. It's a victim, and it is you. What caused you to do this if you did it? And then we come to find out that that individual was abused. It was trauma going on, and a whole bunch of stuff. But look what he's doing now. He's a trustee in the prison. He's the one that's he's over hospice programs. You know,
or he's training dog. Like he got this book over here.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, it was based on a dog training program. I remember I was in Max. I saw some. Maybe it was a medium. I forget. But I was locked up, and I saw like a PBS documentary about, you know, there was like a dog training program in some prison somewhere. I can't remember if it was in America. And so I wrote to our director of the prison system. I was like, we need a dog training program.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I'd write some kind of letter like that, you know, every few months. And they didn't do it while I was there, but they did it after I left. And so, you know, some friends of mine, including, you know, Ryan and Steve, you know, they were critical dog trainers. And Steve, when he got transferred to Connecticut, he actually was the first trainer there when they built out the programs. He was in Rhode Island. He was like the main trainer there and transferred that skill over. And, you know, there's a lot of talented, skilled people. And I always think, like, when I'm down here and I see you guys getting out in like your 50s and 60s sometimes, I mean, I was in bald heads, but you can just lie and say you just like the shaved look. But they got, you know, when I was in there, you know, as a young person and surrounded by young people looking at serious time, you know, everything from teenagers to early 20s. A lot of us got out in our 30s and 40s instead of our 50s, 60s, and 70s, you know, and I think I only know like one person who like did something bad. And we're talking like hundreds of people. And so like everyone else is really trying to do something positive, you know, with their life. They may not be trying to win a Nobel Peace Prize or something, and they're not, you know, going to law school and getting a JD like yourself and, you know, trying to like build networks and connections to try to make a better society. But people want the same things anyone else wants. They want like just some peace and quiet, a job that makes them feel like, you know, they've got some meaning and they're doing something good. Maybe some kids, maybe a partner, maybe be good to their elderly parents. You know, maybe it was a mom who stood by them all those years. And, you know, meanwhile in Louisiana, it's like we have to put up such a fight for anyone to have that opportunity. And there's about 6,000 people that are over 50 in our system. And, you know, many of them without a current mechanism for release unless they're literally on their deathbed. And so, I mean, what are we going to do? Just keep on keeping on?
That's all we can do.
Yeah.
Those of us that get out of prison, we got to continue to be the person that we became while we was in prison. Educators, educating ourselves, helping other people. And in doing this, people on the outside would recognize, whoa, what's such.
Yeah. What else? What other jewels can we pull out?
Exactly.
So when you got out, and when I moved down here, there was about 46,000 people in the penitentiary system, and now there's like 26,000 people. And crime was higher then than it is now, even though people want to say crime is high, but they're not actually looking at the statistics.
But the people that go to prison, the people that's doing the crime, committing crime out, it's not the people that just got out. No, that's not. And I we know better. Mm-hmm. And so people on the outside, they don't question when they make that correlation.
Yeah.
Like, how many people I know that did that? I don't know them, but I read about did mass shooting. These people ain't never been to prison.
And you know what? As long as I've been with Vote, which has been, like 12 years now or something, only one time do I recall going to court to support a Vote person. In 12 years. And that person was arrested, was accused of something that wasn't like a major felony, but it was a felony. And then it turned out that, after a few weeks, they got released.
Yeah.
And so, if we were the problem, Vote would be in the courthouses all the time supporting our members. But I think where the people in the community maybe get confused, including some of the legislators, is there is some chronic challenges for some people who have addiction issues or mental health issues. And a lot of times their crimes involve like some lower level property offenses and shoplifting.
Going in stores, making sandwiches, going in, trying to get clothes.
Yeah. I knew a guy, they called him, there was an article about him, something like the sandwich maker or something. He would break into houses and make, it's funny, I didn't think about him until you just said that, but he would make a sandwich. He was not, all together. He was a nice guy, right? But so when people talk about third, fourth, fifth type offense, they're not talking about people that did major time or even major crimes. They're usually, to get a fifth offense, it had to be low enough that you were able to get a low enough time while they're handing out time like candy, for you to actually live long enough to catch a fifth offense. But if we don't really have a public health approach to mental health or addiction.
Yeah, they say all our mental health facilities closed down, and the only mental health facility now in the city is the jail.
Which is not providing a constitutional level of care. So can we even consider it a mental health facility? Yeah. It's just a place for a lot of mentally ill people.
Just being housed and saying, I'm just going to, still as opposed to treating the people. They just let them. They just wait and ultimately lock people up.
Yeah. So how are we so lucky to get you in the building? After you went across the country, you went to Portland, Oregon, Lewis and Clark Law School, graduated from a great program with amazing classmates. You've met people around the country at this point in time. How did you end up back here in this building?
Well, we all started this movement at the same time. The Special Civics Project. Uh-huh. We all had an idea that if some kind of way we could get out of prison, we could educate other people. We could actually share our experience. Mm-hmm. So I went to law school knowing where I wanted to be. I wanted to continue to help people in prison overcome obstacles that stops them from their cases being considered. Mm-hmm. That's my profession. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. Mm-hmm. Vote has always done, like Norris has always done what he's doing now. Mm-hmm. In prison he did. Chico did the same thing. Wilbur did the same thing. You doing the same thing that you did when you was on the inside. We all doing the same thing that we did on the inside because we think we have the answer. And so, what all of us continue to be together,
we're stronger together.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't go to law school because I wanted to spend all my time in front of a jury. I went to law school so I could be put in a position, get the education I need to go into the prisons to help people that cannot afford a lawyer, to help train other people that wants to do the same work on the inside, to help people get access to the courts. That's what I would, and
that's fine. I didn't go for all I went to show people that like we could do it. People that have been convicted of a serious crime, whether they did it or didn't do it. People that have been locked up for a serious amount of time can intellectually and work ethically apply themselves to law school and handle that academic stress and do well and inspire not just others who've been down the same road that maybe they could do that as well, but also try to inspire the free community that maybe had never met someone like yourself or myself to be able to say like, wow, like I didn't really seem to know nothing about it until I met Calvin.
That's what happened when I went to law school. Mm-hmm. I gave my classmates the opportunity to meet a person out on the other side of that paper that we go to those cases. Mm-hmm. And I think being given that opportunity, I'm so glad that opportunity came. I went to Lewis and Clark. I'm so happy that I did because of the community that they actually. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't for my classmates, I wouldn't have survived.
Yeah.
They got to know me, and some of the things that they didn't judge. I never felt judged there. Mm-hmm. They got to know me as
I felt judged.
Calvin. They realized Calvin don't like his laptop. Mm. It's not that I don't like my laptop. I write everything out. Mm-hmm. So they helped me with my laptop. Mm-hmm. If I had a problem, my classmates helped me. If I had any other problem, the doors was open to the professors. Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad because I've heard other people talk about their law school. And I'm so glad I went to Lewis and Clark.
How'd you handle the winter being a Southern Louisiana boy?
So the only thing that I couldn't handle was the grayness, the lack of sun. Uh-huh. That drove me insane.
Yeah.
I love everything. The rain didn't bother me. The cold weather didn't bother me. What bothered me was that lack of vitamin D from that sun.
Listen, you're not doing a good job of selling people on the Pacific Northwest right now.
I would tell anybody if you decide to go to the Pacific, Northwest, take in consideration how can you get a scholarship or can you get some extra money? Uh-huh. So on weekends you could fly to a place where there's sun, and then come back.
They have these lights now that you can put on the wall that like.
Them lights didn't do no justice for me. My classmates, they tried it.
Really?
In the end, we was all exhausted. So I would add a part of it in that scholarship that people that give, that you could go take a trip on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, shoot down to San Diego.
Go anywhere where it's sun, and then come back. You'll feel different. And,
This is good life advice. Well, it's funny is you heard it here from the source. Another book that we had lying around here is one of my favorite writers, Frantz Fanon. And anyone that's ever gotten an email from me has seen a quote of his that's at the bottom of my email, which is, the peasant doesn't have to talk about the truth. The peasant is the truth. And I really appreciate you being here today because you are the truth. Even though we talk about it, you be about it. And when you walk in the room, you change the temperature of the room. And change how people sit up. So I really appreciate getting to know you over the years. One of the first people I met when I got down here, the man who actually.
I even remember saying, I'll give you a bicycle.
Yeah, you bought me a damn bicycle.
Your first bicycle, you get in Tulane. And you got in Tulane, it was like, whoa. Then I said, that's possible.
Yeah, I got a free bike out of the deal. So it worked out.
And you had a conviction, and I had a conviction.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, Bruce could do it. I could do it.
And you did.
And I did it. So yeah. And then that was a kind of like the highlights of having to give up that bicycle because you made it.
Yeah, that's why I got stolen on me, but I got another one. But it gave me a lot of good miles that helped me get to school. It didn't get stolen until after I graduated. So.
And it's a testament that without obstacles, we could do a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We could do whatever we could do. We could live and do whatever, everything that other people is doing on the outside. We could do it without the obstacles. But if somebody's putting their foot behind the door, then we have a problem.
And there's one thing I've learned is that, teamwork, I'm not going to say that slogan makes the dream work, but teamwork is critical.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of folks, for a lot of reasons, don't even have the option for teamwork because they're solitary confinement is one example, right? Yeah. But, for a lot of us, the temptation might be to kind of do it yourself. Those of us that are like, childhood survivors, like we maybe did a lot ourselves. But for me, like, joining this team and building this team has been like really the key to our success collectively. And if the door is big and if there's stuff behind it, you're going to need a lot of people to kind of pull and tug and coordinate to get that door open. Yeah. So that's what's up here. But
teamwork.
Calvin, any final thoughts for the Change the Change people?
Yeah. Become a member, vote. Come see the family members. I would hope that, the parents and the family members of those individuals that's incarcerated will come and actually learn. Because what they know about the system is based upon what they heard. And generally what they heard about the system is totally wrong. I hope that people come and ask questions. They want to know, just ask basic questions. What option do my son or my daughter have? They're in prison. They seem to have got, their minds right now. So what's the options for them? What's stopping, do they have once, if they was young, do they have the option of, the opportunity to go to school? And they could come here and they could ask those questions. They could be a part of this whole community. And I think I think New Orleans is blessed to have vote where the people.
Well, we got Baton Rouge and Lafayette chapters too.
Exactly.
With staff and offices and monthly meetings.
They could come to the monthly meeting and ask questions. They could learn a lot about this criminal justice system that is seeming to be snatching people out of the community and bringing them to another place.
Yeah.
They could come learn. And that's what it's all about, learning. And we need a lot of education about our criminal justice system.
Yeah, so people can become members of Vote and and find out a lot about kind of how that works through voiceoftheexperience.org. But they can also get down with Voters Organized to Educate and be an informed voter, where we're doing a lot of hard work to kind of investigate who it is that's running for office, what kind of values they have, and how they might be able to help the community, and if they're going to operate with the type of integrity that you were saying that we need in our prosecutors. Yeah,
and even the prosecutors, the judges could say, I don't know about this issue. I don't know about what happens in prison. I don't know what I don't know. So let me go to Vote and learn and hear different perspectives. And then just imagine how well-informed that judge would be, or well-informed that prosecutor would be, or the lawyer. So even the churches, even the mental health community, everybody could learn from our experience. And the good thing about it is that we are willing to share it.
Yeah. Well, with that is going to be the last word.
My last word is that come to vote.
That's what's up.
Come get educated about our system.
Calvin Duncan, JD. Thanks for coming through.
Thank you.
A lawyer. He's a lawyer. I can't
Somebody told me the other day, I'm a lawyer. No. I'm a lawyer, but I'm not an attorney.
Yeah.
Attorney, when you get your license.
That's what I say too. I'm a lawyer. I'm used to that. All right. Well, this is DJ Bruja. I am out of here. Word up to Dangerous Devin Davis on the ones and twos. And all right, we're going to chill till the next episode.
Thank you. Hold on.
All right.